Good morning, everyone. I hope so far you had a great SME. I had a great one. My name is Pedro Roganci. I'm an assistant professor of mining engineering at New Mexico Tech. I'm filling in for the chairs of the sessions, Dr. Duzgun, Dr. J, and Dr. Beckstrom. Unfortunately, they couldn't make it today, so I will help with the session, organizing the session. This is a full session, so I don't think we're going to have break unless a presenter go less than 20 minutes, which I don't think is going to happen. This is health and safety, risk assessment, and hazard recognition session. So if you're in a wrong session, welcome. Please stay. And because this is a health and safety session, we absolutely have to start with a safety share or health share. Any volunteer for the safety share? And please use the microphone for the share. Anyone?
Don't be shy about pointing something out. So I was walking around town this morning, and there were a couple of small construction jobs going. There was a guy that was standing up on a. Do I need that?
Well, we're recording.
Oh, all right then. So there was a young man that was standing up on top of like an awning, open hole about 2 feet to his right, and I stopped and just asked if they had anything that they could put up, if there was anything he could tie off to. He wasn't wearing a harness. About 15 feet up. Asked if there were handrails, and was met with not the same thing that I see out at the mine site. Basically, I was kind of questioned, like, why are you concerned about this? Yeah. I just took a minute, explained it to them, still didn't seem to change their attitude on it, and so I just moved on. Yeah. But I guess the thing with me is it actually made me feel very uncomfortable to stop and say something to them, because it's not people that I work with, it's not people that I see on a day-to-day basis, but we at least have to take a minute if we see somebody doing something that could potentially hurt them, okay, whether we know them or not, and say something.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Anything else? I have a quick health share because I'm an occupational health person. Well, I don't know much about the new virus, coronavirus, and how we can avoid getting one. But make sure you have the basic hygiene, and if you see somebody's coughing, just please tell them that to use cover their mouths. With that being said, I'm going to introduce our first presenter, Ms. Jenica Bellanca. She is a bioengineer with the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, NIOSH. She has been working in mining for almost 8 years. Her research focuses on human factors related to haul truck, hazard recognition, and virtual reality. So please welcome Ms. Bellanca.
All right, thank you. Oh, just restart that. So because we're from the government, our template doesn't work on their computer, so just so you know, that's how it always works. But thank you very much for joining us today. Today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the question that's motivating our research is, why do haul truck fatal accidents keep happening? And really, it's kind of a big deal because we've been working on this problem for a very long time. And on the high level, powered haulage continues to account for at least 50% of the fatalities every year, even though we have spent a lot of time thinking about these problems and we've done a lot of good work. And haul trucks are really the largest contributor. They were 6 in the last 2 years were related to haul trucks. And haul trucks are also a big problem because they do account for a lot of the pieces of mining equipment. On a whole throughout the industry, they're about 45% of all mining equipment by cost. So it's a big deal. And we can probably start to understand why haul trucks might be a problem. There's a lot of monotonous driving involved with it. There can be a lot of rough roads depending on where you're at or what situation. There can be a lot of good roads too, but we do have challenges. There's changing conditions, whether it's weather, people, or anything else. That's true with all of mining, as well as limited visibility in the large trucks. It's obviously a known problem, not a surprise to anyone in this room. And the low responsiveness of the vehicle. You have this very large vehicle. We can't change the laws of physics. It takes a while to move it. Despite our best efforts, we still are limited by that. And also, a lot of times they're moving in and out of congested areas, at least in terms of part of the haulage area coming in and out. And we had a lot of different previous analysis looking at haul truck fatal accidents, and they've identified some high-level factors like vehicle control, hazard recognition, as well as human performance leading into some of these fatal accidents. So what we wanted to do was look at this again, and this is kind of diving into our project, but we wanted to take a more holistic view and kind of look at a large picture as opposed to some of the accident analysis that have been done in the past. So for this, we were using bow type representation, so we can look at it and understand sequential parts of the event, the causes, the initiating event, as well as the outcome. And to do that for this research, we actually looked at haul truck fatal accidents from 2005 to 2018. It was a grand total of 91 in the US. And for this, we're looking at anything that happened to or because of a mine worker operating a haul truck. So just so you know, this includes some of the maintenance activities with it, because we're just interested in what's going on around this piece of equipment. And for this research, we started looking at the different pieces of the bow tie. We looked at the causes, and really we wanted to start looking at all the possible causes. We weren't worried about associating priority, because if there's a hazard there, it's kind of important, and knowing that it may at one point become uncontrolled. So looking at it from the control standpoint. We also looked at the preventative controls, any possible preventative controls related to these possible hazards, as well as the initiating event, the event that immediately led to loss of control of hazards, so that tipping point in which it led to it. And then any mitigating controls that could have reduced the severity of the accident, and then the outcome. So for this particular analysis, we were really focused on what caused the fatal accident. So we're looking at one outcome for each of the fatal accidents. And let me just go into a little bit more detail about what we looked at. So for initiating events, we ended up using 6 categories. We looked at ones that were equipment malfunction, ground control failure, loss of balance, loss of control of the vehicle, and then loss of control of situational awareness, and then anything that didn't fit into those categories, which was just a few. And so I'd like to point out kind of where we broke it down. We have loss of control is where the operator lost control due to the lost control of the vehicle in the presence of performance-reducing hazards. It's a mouthful, but essentially it was the fact that there's something there that made their job hard. So we're distinguishing that between loss of situational awareness, where everything is as expected. They're not in a particularly challenging position, but still possibly either lost control of the hazards or lost control of the vehicle in that way. And then as far as the outcomes, we looked at it similar to if you ever looked at the RiskGate website and group. We used a very similar interaction type categorization for this. So we used whatever was in motion interacting with whatever the hazard was. So we came up with a couple of categories for this. So we have vehicle environment. So this is where the operator loses control or otherwise drives the vehicle into environmental hazard. So somebody's driving and they hit something. So whether it's a berm or drives into a pond, that's kind of the driver and the environment. We also have the vehicle pedestrian. So that's pretty straightforward, a collision with a vehicle and a pedestrian that's out in the mine site. We have vehicle-to-vehicle interaction, so that's a collision between 2 vehicles. We have this material person, so that's material actually hits the person. And then we have material hits the vehicle. So that depends on how they're working with the vehicle, which is the distinction between those 2. And the last one, which is kind of confusing, but I think it's really important to consider, is this 3-way interaction. So we have person, vehicle, environment. So this is really the idea that the person is in motion. The vehicle causes something to make the hazard more difficult, and then they end up interacting with an environmental hazard to result in a fatality. So an example of one of the fatalities was that the haul truck caught on fire. The person was exiting the haul truck, and they had to walk past the engine compartment on the escape, and then basically fell to the ground and was also burned. So it's because of the vehicle that the fire happened. That's why we're categorizing it differently than just an environmental hazard. So understanding that how the vehicles are designed, like where the egress stairs may be, or how it's set up, could impact these fatalities and what's going on with that. So now that you kind of have the lay of the land, there's one more piece to look at our analysis. So we have all the controls that we went through. So we used this, looked at it in terms of emergent themes. So we basically went through and read everything to see what we could see, and found all the critical controls. But then we organized the critical controls under the immersed 9-level defensive control structure. We did this to hopefully help make it more understandable and kind of relate to a lot of the critical control strategies that people are currently using. There's obviously many ways to look at it. This is just the way we chose to do for our analysis. And so what we found, so first looking at what all the accidents were that we identified. And what is, I think, pretty interesting, the first one is that haul truck fatal accidents sort of disproportionately affect large coal mines and metal nonmetals, and most commonly occur in coal and stone mines. So you can see here that you have more large mines that were in our data set with a fatal accident in the coal and metal nonmetal commodities, and that's different than sort of the lay of what all the mines are in the industry. We're vastly made up of small mines, but we have a lot of large mines being represented in this data set. And then also, again, you have, there were predominantly coal and stone mines that were affected by these type of fatalities that we identified here. Also interesting from the data was that haul truck-related fatalities are not just powered haulage. We have this really large push from MSHA with their powered haulage initiative and kind of talking about vehicles, large vehicles hitting smaller vehicles. I think it's important to remember from a systems perspective when you're talking about haul trucks, there are more accidents and fatalities that happen around haul trucks than just those powered haulage accidents that are identified there. And so in our data set, actually 26% that we identified were other than powered haulage. And so when we map all of these fatalities through time, and there's kind of a lot to look at, but the colors here are representing the type of outcome. So think about it like the type of accident. And what we noticed in the data was these blue bars, that predominantly this vehicle environment accident is what's happening, which isn't really a surprise to anybody, but I think it's worth pointing out as we get new things coming and going, the underlying problem is still somebody operating the haul truck, and it's good to remember that. Another thing is that the other common fatalities that we saw were the vehicle-to-person collision and vehicle-to-vehicle collision. So these are kind of occurring. And I know it's a hot topic in the industry with collision avoidance and collision warning systems. And it's interesting to sort of look at where the vehicle-to-person fatalities are still happening and then vehicle-to-vehicle, because we have different availability of that technology in the mining industry. Some people don't look at the person, but it still is a issue here in the data set. So the top 4 types of outcomes that came out were vehicle environment, person, vehicle environment, vehicle person, and vehicle vehicle. So I'm going to look at the rest of the data set kind of in context to that to help us hone in on some of the stuff that's going on. Because again, it's really important to look at like one piece of the system and watch it go through. So what we found first was that environmental hazard fatalities were mostly initiated by loss of control and equipment malfunction. So that's going around into controlling the vehicle and making sure the vehicle is ready and set for duty. So it's kind of an important thing for us to look back at. Additionally, that when we look at vehicle and pedestrian collisions, the fatalities were mostly initiated by loss of situational awareness. So this is kind of saying, if that's the type of fatalities you're targeting, you need to look back at the person. And it's not that something is happening in the environment, or at least in these cases, it's that, the operator themselves and understanding really what's going on with the operator. Another interesting finding from the data was that the causes were predominantly low-level controls. And so when we think about causes in this case, again, it was those possible hazards. So we like to, I'm presenting them here as failures of critical controls. because there is a hazard present. And we have a lot of stuff going on in the industry focusing in on technology. Well, in these cases, the technology is not necessarily what's failing. It's everything that's leading up. So it's really important that mine sites have a good, solid base. They have good mine design, good segregation policies, good operational policies before they're leading into reactive control. And that's kind of what you see here. And specifically in this case, failure to follow procedures was really the top cause that we identified, meaning that for some reason, not necessarily saying it's the operator's fault, because that's not really possible for us to say from this data set, but what's going on with the operator that they're choosing or they have to fail to follow these procedures is kind of a question that arises when we see this data. And that's really focused in on this at level 6, which is having your operator compliance. Another interesting piece from the data is that operator compliance and site requirement control failures were identified in almost all of the accidents. Though this is not surprising if you've ever read an MSHA report, I think it's really important to remind people that there are still things that we can do and things that we should be looking at. So when you see here, you have operator compliance at level 6, and then you also have site requirements. So that's, are your roads, are your berms adequate? These are easy things that we could be fixing to help make mine workers safe. And I think we need to remember going back to the basics is kind of what we're pointing out here. When we take some time to look at some of the mitigative controls on the far side of the initiating event, what was interesting out of this is they're far more varied by outcome because, again, they're targeting what's going on and what's following from that. So what I want you to get from this graph is basically looking at how we have person-vehicle environment where we have a really sort of heavy in this middle of operation controls that could have helped with mitigative controls. So if we're thinking about policy and procedure and site readiness, that could really help in this type of accident. But when you look at the other ones, maybe more of the reactive controls can help, and then they vary based on that and what's available. So overall, the take-home points is that vehicle operation remains a core issue. Again, remembering these are the most common types of accidents and how they're occurring. And they really affected 78% of the accidents that we did look at. Another thing to consider because of the different size distributions is that we're using these vehicles differently at different mines. There's really not a good categorization of who uses haul trucks, when, and where. Are you just using it for overburden? Are you using it for your ore? Does it matter in terms of timing? And I think that really affects how fatalities or accidents may play out. Some of the overall data is pointing to issues in maintenance and inspection, traffic controls, berms dumping, communication, as well as drugs and alcohol and weather. And then on the mitigative control side, we're talking about driver assist, seatbelts, collision avoidance and warning systems, as well as remote operation as an option, monitoring, reporting, and understanding what's going on. Another takeaway from looking at this data is that there is a high rate of operators failing to follow the established site and policy procedures like I had mentioned. And it's really unclear by the MSHA fatal accidents what's motivating them. A lot of these accidents, the operator's no longer with us, unfortunately. So we don't know what was going on. So I think we as an industry and then we as a continued research vein want to look into why this is going on. Are these policies and procedures not adequate? Is there something that these edge cases going on? What's motivating these operators to be able to do this and move forward? In the data set that we did have, some of the identified factors included inexperience, training, the typical things that kind of come out, but also lack of enforcement, and as well as inadequate policies and procedures and lack of information. So these failures can occur on all levels. It's not just the operator's fault, it's not just the organizational fault, and as a system, we need to make sure that we know what's going on with that. So what I want you guys to take away from this message and kind of what we found was it's really important to look at it from a whole system. Don't just focus on the operator, don't just focus on the organization, focus on everything as a whole and looking at how initiating events can lead to outcomes and where things can fit in. It's also really important for us to focus on low-level controls. Make sure that the basics are met before we jump into other ways of moving forward. And then lastly, I think that given what we see in the initiating events of these fatalities, there is an opportunity for us to develop reactive controls that help in the realms of loss of control as well as loss of situational awareness. So if we can help operators improve their ability to maintain control of the haul truck, whether it's just their attention or it's actually physically operating the vehicle, we can help reduce some of these fatalities and accidents. And that's all I have for you guys. Does anybody have any questions?
Thank you. It was a good talk. I'm curious if you were able to study on any autonomous systems. I mean, as NIOSH, were you given any data from an autonomous side? Whether you have less accidents or no accidents from autonomous sites? Do you know anything about it?
Yeah, I mean, so overall, there has not been one reportable fatality with autonomous systems. So we do know that worldwide. In the United States, which is what's the focus of this analysis, there aren't enough systems in operation to really say that one way or the other. That's definitely a part of our work moving forward, and we've taken that kind of into account. I think from my perspective, in terms of human factors, I think that we need to understand what's going on with the manned system, because that leads into requirements for the autonomous systems as well, and understanding, because when you do put in any sort of automated or mechanized system, it's not a one-to-one replacement. So understanding sort of what's going on, we kind of fit it in there. So that's a non-answer to you. I say it depends. It depends on the implementation a lot. And we don't have enough data to yet know, but we're working on looking into that as well.
Any other questions? No? I have a question.
Sure.
So you mentioned that the number of accidents in large mines are higher compared to a smaller operation.
It was the fatal accidents in this data set, yes.
Yeah. So do you think is there any relationship or correlation between the number of trucks that large operations have compared to a smaller operation? So if you compare that in that regard, do you still think larger operations have more fatal accidents?
So approximately worldwide, there's about 45,000 haul trucks in operation, give or take. And when you look at the amount of mines, so there's like 14,000 mines in the US. The worldwide, that's not one-to-one comparison, but there's a lot of little mines. So I think that, number one, the data doesn't, I don't have the data on how they're specifically used at what mine. No one reports that. They don't report that to MSHA. We're this mine, we use this many trucks. So I can't make that statement for sure. But when you do look at the proportions, you do see that given the number of mines, it is high. There's a higher number of smaller mines with 1 or 2 trucks than there are having 100 or 50 or 25. Because really, you're looking at a lot of these mines have between 1 and 5 trucks. There's more of those than there are at the large mines. But that's not to say congestion isn't an issue.
Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
We have a little bit of transition here. The next we have Mr. Sean Martell. Mr. Martell is the North American Mining and Construction Sales Manager at Preco Electronics in Boise, Idaho. He began with the company in 2015. Sean's many years of experience in sales with the Caterpillar dealership in the Northwest has been instrumental in his understanding of the mining, construction, and agriculture industry. He is the corporate director of his family's 4th-generation Idaho farm and has spent his lifetime operating with heavy equipment. Mr. Martell's knowledge of heavy equipment and application provides Presco's customers insight of the value of preview radars safety technology. Sean has 20 years of experience in the sales arena, including managing packaging, equipment distribution, warehouse, and extensive experience in corporate accounting. Mr. Martell holds a BBA in accounting and finance from College of Idaho. Please welcome Mr. Martell.
Thank you. Okay, good. Oh. Was it off? Okay, sorry. Okay. Can you hear me? All right, thank you, Jenica. That was great. So welcome, good morning. My name is Sean Martell. I'm with Preco Electronics, and I want to talk a little bit about who Preco is and then what we do in the safety field with radar. Do we have a clicker? I'm not seeing it. Oh, right here. It looks like a mouse. Yeah, okay. Okay, so a little bit of a roadmap of where we're going to go here. Talk about Preco, what's driving safety in the mobile fleet industry, the challenges with behavior, how to drive successful safety technology implementation, what's the deal with radar. I'll talk a little bit about a deep dive into it and what it has to offer. Simple way to present safety technology as an investment, not as an expense. We have a lot of accountants that run companies. They like to talk about numbers. Well, I have a tool here that might be useful to you. And we'll do some case studies if there's time, and then questions. So Preco, we've been around a long time. We're out of Boise, Idaho. It was founded in Boise, 1947. And the family still owns the company, the original owner that started it. We have been involved with the OE, Caterpillar, John Deere, and a lot of the OEs for a number of years. And in the 1960s, we invented the electronic backup alarm and patented it. Had that for a number of years. And then in 1999, we actually developed the first 5.8 gigahertz technology radar in our company and implemented that in the mining industry. So we've been doing radar for a long time. We've done a number of other things in the electronics field. We actually, back in the 80s, built one of the first telematics systems called Precise. That was through a subsidiary of who we were, and we spun that off. So we've done a lot of interesting things. So let's talk about fatalities, and we all know there's a cost to them, emotionally, physically, and financially to family, friends, and to the company. So, you know, the goal here is to take that MSHA report of fatalities and drive it to zero. I mean, we don't want to see any fatalities if possible. But we talk about, I've got information up here that works for both the on-road and off-road in multiple industries, because that's what we do. But if you look at the trucking accidents in the U.S., this is fairly current information. We're talking thousands of accidents a year, and we're talking about fatalities. The 2018 report there shows that we have 14 deaths every day. This would be more the OSHA type information on road public. And if you look at the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, the cost of an accident, the average cost of a truck accident, $148,000. I'm assuming this is all in cost, your direct, your indirect, your legal, your mitigation, all that. So very, very expensive. But what's the problem? And I think this follows along pretty tightly with what Jenica presented in the last presentation, is the majority of accidents are operator error. We can call them distracted. We can say they fell asleep, and maybe they're on drugs. There's something going on that has caused them to miss something that's important that they don't react to. I can even consider a distraction being somebody who's very tunnel focused on their job, like a loader operator. I mean, these guys they have to produce. They have to go in the pile, grab a pile, get out, and go dump. So they're spending 50% of their time in reverse. And a lot of people don't realize how much time a loader operator spends in reverse. So these guys are going all the time. People come around them, they see they got these big windows on them, they think they can be seen, and what they'll do is they'll drive on around behind them and not realize that they're not seen, and an accident will happen. In fact, yesterday, I was at a site here in Phoenix, and one of the customers shared with me that they had an accident between a loader and a truck driver, and the loader operator, whoops, sorry, I got ahead of myself here, actually went up to adjust the radio, and the driver in the truck thought he waved him on and recognized that he saw him. And so the truck driver proceeded, the operator kept backing up, and there was contact. So those are the types of things that you need to be aware of. 30% could be environment, and of course then there's always vehicle maintenance, could be failed brakes, it could be something that breaks on the vehicle that can cause an accident. Environmental is, the types of things like you've got rocks on the roadway, failure of a roadway or something along that line that is out of control of the operator. Okay, so what's the goal? It's to control behavior. It's to prevent the domino effect from happening. How many times have we seen where we see a set of events start and we just see it coming, and sure enough, an accident happens? So the idea is to implement controls that stop something bad from happening, whatever the case may be. So this is my idea of how to implement a successful plan inside of an organization. And this is dynamic. There's not a start and there's not an end. You can't have that. And here's one reason why you can't do that is you'll notice here we got management, we've got operator maintenance, we've got personnel involved in this. And personnel in a company is dynamic. We have people coming and going all the time. And so if you want a successful system, you've got to make sure that you create a plan that maintains the process and maintains the training, maintains the characteristics of the safety culture that you're trying to implement. And I don't know that there's any place that you can start or stop here. I think it's all important. But one of the things that I've found in the success of the companies that I work with when they implement radar or some safety technology on their site is management support. You assign accountability. You define the process. You have to train your operators and maintenance personnel both. Both people or both groups have to be aware of how the systems work because one's operating the machine, the other's working on it, and they need to know how to fix it or as an audit to check against the operator to make sure it's working. So this was brought up in Jenica's report about operator negligence or whatever you want to call it. So in a number of cases, I've seen where operators have entitled themselves to these machines, and so they'll disable these systems. And then there's no check or balance to make sure it's working. And you know how I find out about it? Is after they've been disabled for a while, I get a call, and they're like, hey, we had an accident with your machine with a radar on it. And I said, well, go check it out. They get in the machine, they find out that the system's been deactivated. It's not working. While it was working, it was doing everything it was supposed to do. It was actively detecting hazards and warning the operator. And so this is an eye-opener for management because you see the talk. Operators will sit there and say, oh yeah, we're into safety and we're into it 100%. But then if you do an implementation on a machine, you'll find out pretty quickly how much buy-in there really is. So you need to set up a check and balance system. Operator teamwork. It's always fun to put a little competition in there, share the stories of the success of the safety so that there's a buy-in and they recognize the value. Because you're going to get across the board people that love it, people that hate it. And you're going to have everything in between. I think it's important, too, when you add a tool, a safety tool, that you do a GSA after you've implemented that and look at what the machine's doing. Have you put that machine and that operator in an environment that maybe is risky to begin with? Even though you've got active radar technology on it, perhaps the environment for the machine, he's just too close or she's too close to equipment or debris or to a high wall or whatever, and they're just asking for trouble. So you've raised your probability of an accident happening regardless of what the technology is you're using. So a GSA, I think, is really important. It's a tool. Measure and share. Recognize the operators who are promoting it and the benefit of the technology, whatever technology you're using, and the process begins again. So let's talk about enhancement of the diagram I showed there. So In my 5 years of working with customers in the radar business, the ones who have engaged and have provided some kind of a support system like I've showed you are the ones who are benefiting the greatest from the technology. So what we're seeing is they've seen improvements of even up to 100% reduction in incidents with the radar in the blind areas, specific to the technology that they wanted. And then the ones who have kind of implemented it and walked away and didn't follow up with training and make sure that a new operator gets on the machine and operates it and understands it, we see that the incident improvements are good, but they're not as good as they could be. So there's an ROA calculation that I found online that I thought fits pretty nicely into this field. It's called the risk reduction ROI. And basically, you just take your annualized rate of occurrences, the monetary loss for a single event, and then you've got your reduction in probability of risk or occurrence with the implemented control. So basically, the calculation works in this example is 6 incidents in a year. Those incidents cost you $50,000. Now, what's important on the cost is make sure you guys account for indirect and direct. Across the board, I've had people tell me that indirect can be anywhere from 2 to 10 times what the direct costs are. So make sure you understand how you're measuring your costs when you're providing this information. What's your experience rating after you've had, I don't know how many of you know what experience rating is, but that impacts your insurance. It could potentially impact your ability to build or bid a job, particularly for contractors in the construction business. Are you incorporating the fines that go into the cost of the accident from MSHA or OSHA, if that happens? Like a secondary loss is $130-some thousand, I think, for a fine. And then in this case, I figured, okay, risk reduction probability of 90% rather than 100, $270,000 is what your costs are in a year. And if you take the implementation, this is one machine, and if it costs you $5,000 to put that on, that $5,000 is all in. That's your cost for labor, that's your parts, yada, yada. Then you have an ROI of 5,300%. Numbers don't lie, it's right there. You guys can slice and dice this any way you want, but the reality of it is you just saved yourself all that money on a $5,000 investment. A couple of other examples. So if you've got 10 loaders, and you still have 6 accidents in those 10 loaders, and your cost of those accidents is $10,000, you still come up with an ROI of 96%. It's still a winner. You're going to recover your cost in a year's time very quickly. And if you think about that over the course of several years, it's money in the bank. Okay, talk a little bit about what radar is. Radar's been around a long time. It was discovered in the 1800s. It's been used on a large scale for a number of years for for military and for airports. And so what did Preco do and what do the other companies do? Well, they just put it in a small package. So what we do now is we figure out how to detect small objects in a small area on a configured zone behind the sensor. And our primary targeting is human beings. One of the advantages that radar has over all their technology to this day, the other technologies are getting better, but it's still a superior penetration capability through any type of weather condition. We still work in really adverse weather. It's still a redundant system that's used on the autonomous technology today, because when conditions do get bad, then the radar is relied on to operate the equipment. Go further into it, again, just to reiterate, radar is active. It's doing the job for the operator. It's not passive. Cameras are just a high-tech mirror, is all they are. Cameras are not very good at high contrast lighting when you're moving in and out of a building, or if you're moving from shaded area to unshaded area, or if you have the sun looking right into the camera, the operator can't see what's going on. And radar doesn't care about any of that. Radar sensors can handle a considerable amount of material on them and still maintain the accuracy and the integrity of the technology and what it was meant to do. There is a certain point of saturation where they don't work. I mean, there's a limitation to all this, but for example, we put in a fail-safe system that alerts the operator so that they get out and clean the sensor so that the system's always working. And how the technology works in general is it's like the sensors on your cars. We have zones inside the radar range, and those zones give feedback to the operator, let them know if the object is moving away or to them. So is it a threat or is the threat moving away? And we do 5 zones. Each zone has its own unique audible. Each zone has its own unique LED or icon display, depending upon if it's an integrated camera or the LED display. And gives that feedback to the operator. And we have a flexible system where the width and the range are all adjustable as well. And then we have an on-road system for transport, heavy-duty Class 6, 7, 8 trucks, or whatever the case may be, for the blind spot on the right side of the vehicle for lane merger and lane change. So this is basically what it looks like inside of a cab for an operator. Zone 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So that's how the feedback works. The green light is part of our fail-safe system on this particular LED module. That tells the operator or maintenance that the system is working properly and that it's communicating to the sensor correctly. If that light was red, that would be an indication the machine should be in a lockout tagout, have it fixed, and get it back to work. Okay, so we have successfully done some stuff underground, room and pillar type environments. We've done some things in tunnels as well, but they have to be fairly large tunnels. We just have to test it if you have interest in it. So metal material has a lot of energy in it, and it's really challenging for radar in a metal mine because the energy coming back to the transmitter with the echo has a big impact on detecting objects that are outside the radar zone. We do a lot of above ground, and we work on we go on a lot of different equipment on the mining side. It can be articulated trucks, haul trucks, big loaders, excavators, and we also do a lot of work in the construction side of things, and we do quite a bit of work with Kiewit. And just to give you an idea of some examples, I know a lot of people are concerned about confined space with radar. But we were on the Rams Arena project. We were on the SR-99 teardown in Seattle. We're on the I-70 project in Denver. We're working with some other locations that require a lot of equipment in tight confined areas. We're talking about skid steers, telehandlers, small, medium, large size excavators, same with loaders. So, you know, if there's a need and, you know, your site's having issues, you know, take a look at this technology and let's see if we can come up with a solution for you. Or for that matter, you know, somebody who you want to talk to that's in the radar business or in the safety technology business. Questions? Yes, sir.
So I came in about halfway through. So let's say there was an event and oh, okay. So I came in halfway through, and I was wondering if does your system have a database where we can go back in and see it after an event, whether or not it was working?
All right, a good question. So we don't offer that right now. What we will do is integrate. So you know, there's companies out there that do a very good job with that. And the question too you have to ask is, do you want that information available on the cloud, or do you want it captured in a box in the machine that you have to go retrieve? So you've got, so those are some of the challenges and why we haven't really went after it. There's other businesses that do that, but we'll integrate. As an example, I don't know if anybody here is familiar with Geotab, but Geotab provides telematics, and we can tie into their OBD component, and it'll report the alerts. And of course, we can work with anybody else too. We work off of the J1939 CAN bus technology, so anybody that's on that technology or uses that protocol, it's really, we share the information and they can tie it into their systems and they can capture it. Yeah. Another one that we do is McNeilis Trucking. They've got the Flex system on their cement trucks. Our radar is incorporated into their system as well, so that it's all reported.
Any other questions?
Do you have any examples of how some of your customers, the successful ones with this system, how they got that buy-in from the operators?
Well, that's a great question. So it's really, we ask for case studies and how they implement this to build the success of the implementation. And it's really hard to get companies to put their name on a label. So, you know, from a conversation standpoint and the people I've talked to, when they implement, okay, well, here's a critical thing that needs to be considered. If you have a machine inspection or a daily operator's inspection on the machine, they have certain things they're supposed to do to make sure that the vehicle is in proper operating conditions. They need, if they're going to put the safety system in place, they need to add that to that checklist. Maintenance needs to make sure it's part of their checklist so it's not overlooked. Because, you know, you're going to train, when we first come in, we'll train a group of people, but, you know, those people change, they move, or if you don't write it down, they forget about it. And so you have to put a system in there that reminds them that they read through it and they say, oh, hey, we need to check this safety system out and make sure it's working properly. That's where we get the successes. And that's where we find that they're long-term, they're getting the benefit out of this investment. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, it's right on time. Our next presenter is Mr. Jonathan Hrica. Mr. Hrica is a mining engineer with the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health mining program. He holds a bachelor degree in mining engineering from the University of Arizona and a master's of science in technology from Arizona State University. His research focuses on hazard recognition, risk perception, and training tool development.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Jonathan Hrica. I'm with the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, Pittsburgh Mining Research Division. And my talk today is a summary of our preliminary investigation into defining and characterizing workplace examiner competencies. This study was done under the umbrella of a larger project on hazard recognition that was led by my colleague, Dr. Brianna Eiter. Brianna is a research behavioral scientist with the NIOSH mining program, and my background is in mining engineering, and when Brianna and I work together, we tend to make a good team because we cover mine workers' safety and health from both the engineering perspective and the social science perspective. And this particular study definitely is more in line with Brianna's expertise, but I'm going to do my best to give you a summary of what we learned from the study and give you some key points to take away and consider when you are preparing mine workers to do the task of workplace examination. So I'm going to begin by describing the events that led up to our investigation into workplace examiner competencies. For this, you have to look back in time about 5 or 7 years ago. This was a particularly bad time for the metal, non-metal sector. There was a sharp increase in the number of fatalities that were occurring. From 2013 to 2015, there were 69 mine workers that were fatally injured. And the Mine Safety and Health Administration took a look at these fatalities, and one of the things they determined is that many of these could have been prevented had an adequate workplace examination been done prior to the incident happening. And they emphasized this point in a 2015 program policy letter by saying that miners would benefit from rigorous workplace examinations conducted by experienced and trained examiners. Oops, wrong direction. So another thing that came out of this was the workplace examination rule. I won't go into any detail about this, but there were several versions of the rule that came out over the years. Most recently, a court order was issued that reinstated the January 2017 version of the rule. But what this meant for the industry was that this was a time when mine operators were looking at how workplace examinations were being done at their sites. They were thinking about who should do the workplace examination. Other groups were looking at developing training for workplace examiners. And also during this time, NIOSH launched a project on investigating factors that would influence hazard recognition abilities. And some of these factors that we looked at included the number of years of experience, their risk perception and risk tolerance. And Jenica's going to get back up here in a few minutes and talk more about the results of that. But this project just ended in October, and there was a number of good outputs from this project, including the Hazard Recognition Challenge and the examiner software, which I'll talk a little bit more about later in the presentation. But during the course of this project, a research opportunity emerged focusing on the competent person. So we wanted to know, what are the specific knowledge, skills, and abilities that make someone good at workplace examinations? What practices are used by mine operators to prepare their mine workers to search for and find hazards in the field? So the first thing we did is we tried to find a definition of the competent person, and there's a definition in the Code of Federal Regulations that says, a competent person is a person having the abilities and experience that fully qualify him to perform the duty to which he is assigned. MSHA gave further guidance on this definition in their 2015 program policy letter that said, the competent person should be able to recognize hazards and adverse conditions that are known by the operator to be present in a work area or that are predictable by someone familiar in the mining industry. So these definitions kind of give you what is expected of the workplace examiner, but they don't really prescribe what type of skills they need to have. They don't really say how much experience an examiner should have. So we started by looking at this problem by identifying the full scope of workplace examiner competencies that someone should have in order to be good at a workplace examination. And for this, we funded a contract with a group called the Group for Organizational Effectiveness. And what they did is they went out and did a comprehensive literature review and took a look at all the research on hazard recognition across various industries and other high-risk occupations like construction, automotive, oil and gas. And they came up with a report, and they came up with this theoretical framework that includes competencies that are based on literature, what a workplace examiner should have in order to be good at recognizing hazards. So we had this bit of information, and since this was a theoretical model, we wanted to begin to validate the content in this model. So we turned to subject matter experts within the industry. Specifically, we wanted to talk to health and safety professionals that were either directly involved in workplace exams or had direct oversight with workplace examiners, and ask them what their perceptions were and what their thoughts were on, what makes someone good at workplace examinations. So we wanted to on one hand, we had this theoretical model, and then on the other hand, we wanted to have this feedback from health and safety professionals, and we wanted to compare these two pieces of information to see how well they lined up so we could begin to validate some of what's in this model here. So we conducted interviews to gather industry perspectives. We developed a semi-structured interview guide for this, designed to sort of elicit information from health and safety professionals. We talked to 9 health and safety professionals, and these individuals had, most of them had more than 15 years of experience in the mining industry. They were all actively employed at a mine site, and many of them had, higher level titles such as safety director, manager of safety, and things like that. So here's an example of some of the questions that were in our interview. What makes someone good at workplace examinations? Should a person conducting workplace examinations have a minimum level of experience? Are the examiners at your site evaluated on how effective they are at performing workplace examinations? So we recorded all these interviews, we transcribed them, and then we did what was called a thematic analysis on the interview data. And what we found was that what the health and safety professionals were telling us did in fact line up with the theoretical model, specifically for these 4 competencies listed here, which are general hazard recognition knowledge, site-specific hazard recognition knowledge, situational awareness, and motivation. And then additionally, a recurring theme, what they were telling us was that workplace examiners should have some minimum level of experience. So when the health and safety professionals talked to us, what they were telling us about general hazard recognition is that the workplace examiner should have a basic level knowledge or general knowledge of hazards. And they gave us examples such as lockout and tagout, housekeeping, things like this that are sort of procedural in nature that someone within the industry should know. But another aspect of this was they told us that it was important that the examiner should know the MSHA standards, and they should be able to know what constitutes a violation in terms of MSHA standards. And when the health and safety professionals talked about site-specific knowledge, they told us that each mine site is unique, and they would need to have, one of them gave an example of geology. So they said every mine site is different when it comes to geology. The examiners have to get out there and walk on top of the high wall, or at least drive slowly in daylight and look for cracks. So this indicated to us that the examiner should have, specialized knowledge that may include things like high wall geology. Or another health and safety professional gave us an example of a fatality that occurred where a 100-ton bin collapsed and fell on top of a truck, and the haul truck driver was fatally injured. And he said, well, in order to be able to recognize this hazard, the workplace examiner would need to have some specialized knowledge of how that bin is constructed. So it's a little bit higher level knowledge than maybe you would get from just basic training. And when the health and safety professionals talked about situational awareness, they said the examiner would have to be able to anticipate or predict what was going to happen, and also being able to associate hazards with the environment around them. And an example that was given was doing a workplace exam during winter. He said if you're inspecting the high wall, they see a lot more movement during wintertime because of freezing and thawing conditions. Lastly, they talked about motivation. They said workplace examiners need to be caring. They need to be someone who is more concerned about their fellow coworkers, and also willing to take the time, someone who's going to do a thorough check of their environment and not just speed through and do it really fast. Lastly, the health and safety professionals told us that they need to have some level of experience and familiarity with their environment. So that kind of ties in with site-specific knowledge as well. But they gave us examples of, it took their examiners at least a year to kind of learn all the tricks and trades of a specific mine site. So that was one of the examples that they gave us. So we took a look at this information and we said, okay, what are some of the practical implications of this, and what are some actionable items that mining organizations can use and take away when they look at this information? And again, we turned to the literature for this, and we found that for general hazard recognition knowledge, training interventions and teachable moments may improve this for mine workers, especially I would encourage interaction between frontline supervisors and mine workers to sort of boost that level of knowledge, kind of going beyond just basic annual refresher training and new miner training. For site-specific knowledge, specialized training, for example, training on how to identify high wall hazards or structural hazards may help boost that sort of site-specific or specialized knowledge of hazards. And then lastly, formalizing risk management practices has been shown in the literature to improve situational awareness. Also, throughout this project, NIOSH developed a software called Examiner, which addresses both general hazard recognition knowledge and site-specific knowledge. And this software, we're currently running a demo of it at our booth down in the exhibit hall. So if you want to take a look at it, I would encourage you to visit our booth and see it in action. It's currently available for download from our website at no cost. So if you're interested in that software, take a look at it. It's available on our website. The easiest way to find it is just to go to Google and type in NIOSH Examiner, and it'll be the first thing that pops up in most cases. And so really this was just a preliminary investigation into mine worker workplace examination competencies. We still have more work to do on this, and overall we want to lead towards improved organizational practices surrounding the workplace examiner. So we're continually looking at this and improving over time. And that's all I have for you today, and I can take any questions if you have them. Comments?
Hi, my name is Audrey Chu. I work for Freeport. I'm located in Tucson in the tech center, and we do a workplace inspection every single day, but only on a limited area. So the way I understood you, you propose a workplace examiner for the whole mine site, which sounds like a humongous job for somebody to be a specialist in all areas.
No, and in fact, what I would encourage is having, conversations between your examiners that work in different areas. That way you get exposure to different specialties and kind of cross-pollinate that knowledge. And that will help kind of boost that site-specific knowledge. But in terms of, this is something that we have seen in industry, especially with the new workplace examination rule being in place. Mining companies are kind of debating whether they should have all of their mine workers do an exam, or they should have a specialized person do the exam for the entire mine. We don't have enough data to tell us, which way is better, but I would sort of leave that up to how you see that best, to what works best for your organization. I've seen both sides of the aisle. Some people will put one person in place to do the exam, perhaps from a legal perspective, because they want to have somebody who is very competent and knowledgeable and has the right resume, so perhaps they're doing it from a legal perspective. Others will take an approach that's more democratized and say, everybody should be doing these exams. And right now, we just don't have enough data to say, which way is better.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No? All right. Thank you very much.
Yep. Thanks. Okay. Muddled my way through that.
For our next presenter, we have, again, Ms. Jenica Bellanca. For those of you who weren't here, she's a bioengineer for NIOSH, and then her expertise is human factor related to haul trucks, hazard recognition, and virtual reality. So,
Hello. Okay. All right, great. So thanks. Now I'm back talking about a different topic, which is really great to follow John. This is a part of the same project that he was talking about, our hazard recognition project. And for this particular talk, we're focusing kind of a follow-up to what John was talking about, where we're looking at identifying the influence of risk attitude, work experience, and safety training on hazard recognition ability. So we're taking what people said and we brought it to the lab to see what the data says. And I don't think I have to tell you in this room, but I will tell you anyway. Hazard recognition is really critical for mine worker safety and health. It's kind of the root of knowing what's going on, and it's really what we all do, why we all do what we all do. That being said, as John gave us a really good introduction about competent person, I think we're at this point in the mining industry where it's really hard to define what a competent person is, who should be doing these exams, whether they're the structured workplace exams or they're exams of your working place as a mine worker, just trying to recognize hazards while you work. Because we do know that situations change as you're working. They're not going to stay static the whole day, and we need to be aware of our surroundings to ensure that we're all safe and maintain health throughout the day. But it was really interesting to us to look at this since there isn't really a definition in the CFR. It doesn't define the necessary competencies to be a competent person and actually perform this workplace exam. So that's why we started to look into a couple of these competencies related to the model that John presented to you earlier. And so for this study, we really focused on 3 competencies. The first one, which is risk attitude. So this can be risk tolerance, risk propensity. There are a couple of different models actually out there that people have used. These are the 2 we're going to look at here. But really, in general, it's the idea that it's the amount of risk that one is willing to accept in pursuit of a goal. So how risky can you be to do what you're doing? And workers who are more risk tolerant will take more risk. So we're looking at the spectrum between that. What we also looked at in this study was site-specific work experience. So previous efforts have really talked about how it's not just experience, but it's safety-specific experience that can make the difference in your abilities to become a good examiner. And another competency that we focused on this study is hazard-specific safety training. So not just training in general, but specific to the hazards you may see on your site. And so, given those 3 competencies that we were interested in exploring, our hypotheses were as follows. 1, mine workers who report being more risk-averse will identify a greater number of hazards than more risk-tolerant mine workers. Another hypothesis we were testing was that mine workers with more safety-specific work experience are more likely to identify hazards than those with less safety-specific experience. And the third is mine workers with hazard-specific safety training are more likely to find more hazards. So again, we're looking at these 3 competencies and seeing if people are better able to identify hazards in the environment. So for the risk attitude, we actually looked at it in 2 different ways. We had first the risk propensity scale. And so this was just a really short questionnaire that has been used in several different fields before, and it's asking workers to rate if they agree or disagree with these 6 constructs here, and then identify how they identify themselves as either a risk avoider or risk seeker. And we also used the surface mine specific risk tolerance workplace scenarios, which is a mouthful, but essentially it is another short questionnaire where we had mine workers rate how comfortable they were with these 3 level scenarios, where we were looking at a low risk scenario, a medium risk scenario, and a high risk scenario. And both of these have been shown to relate to people's risk attitudes in the past. So we kind of use those constructs to measure for our population. And then for experience, how we did it was we recruited participants from 4 different groups to be able to account for different safety experience. And for this particular study, we used safety professionals, which is defined as people working in a safety-specific role that had at least 2 years of experience. Many of them had much more. As you can see here, we also had experienced miners, who are miners that have more than 2 years of experience working in the mine, inexperienced miners, which are less than 2 experience, and then we also had mining engineering students come in as kind of our baseline. They're not really exposed to the mine site. And so, again, we were looking here to sort of stratify between their work experience as well as their safety-specific work experience. So experienced mine workers could have the same number of years of experience, but because of their job, we're categorizing them differently in this case. And then what we also did was we asked them just simply, have they had hazard-specific safety training? So a lot of the people were like brand new to mining. They came in, they never saw anything, so they didn't have any hazard-specific training or specific sites to their mine. So that was just a self-reported measure, assuming that all the people had had their refresher. So it's in addition, separate from that. So we had study participants actually come into our lab in Pittsburgh where we have a 360-degree theater, and we projected pictures that we had taken from a surface stone mine site that had hazards in it. They actually were exposed to 32 different panoramic images with a total of 101 hazards. So that's what we're looking at here. So there are various hazards from roadway rules to cutting towards yourself are some examples of the hazards that are within this scene. And so here you can see a better picture of the setup here. So we have this projection studio where they're in there and we ask them to perform a simulated workplace exam. And then for this study, we were looking at where they looked as well as having them press a button when they identified a hazard. So we can relate it one-to-one with their accuracy of finding these 101 hazards that are presented there. So jumping into the data, it was really interesting. So the first, our first hypothesis, looking at people with their risk attitude, the data actually show that mine workers who report being more risk averse identified a greater number of hazards. So this is a scatter plot with lots of data. So first, let's take a look at just the risk tolerance measure. So in this case, we kind of have it clustered that's going on, but with the ceiling effect to this particular data collection, but we do have different people pulling it down, and there was actually a very low but significant correlation between accuracy and risk attitude for the risk tolerance scale. And we took some time looking at the data specifically, even though we have one that looks like an outlier. It's because we have a huge variability in our people in the experienced group, and that's why that's pulling it down. I think that we need to caution, but it's interesting to see that. We also found that the risk propensity scale, which gives us a broader spectrum, so instead of just being on a 1 to 4 scale, this is on a 1 to 9 scale, which gives us a little bit more power, also does show that people who are more risk averse do identify a greater number of hazards. When we look back at the second hypothesis, the data actually also supported that as well. In this case, we saw that safety professionals were able to identify more hazards than those of engineering students in a significant fashion. You can see that there is a trend going on. The only significant difference was between our low baseline and our high baseline. But that does lead credence to the fact that if you're having this safety-specific experience, it's allowing you to identify these hazards. Something important to note, which we reported on before, is that even the best people aren't super great. We're looking at around 60% of hazards identified. And again, these aren't, we used common hazards. We had, based on the positioning, they were all vetted by subject matter experts, but we tried to do the distribution based on what is commonly seen in the accidents and injuries database. So we tried to represent them to what people would commonly see or commonly experience in that way. Some of the hazards were kind of small, so there is a little bit of error to that, but 60% is still fairly low with respect to that. And then when it comes to our hypothesis 3 about hazard specifics training, in this particular data set, we didn't find any significant difference between the group. It's important to note that in this data set, that was just sort of an extra question. We didn't recruit people based on if they had received it or what training they did, so we don't have any control over that. The literature supports this hypothesis, so I think the jury's still out on this one, and we need to do more investigation to be looking into it. With respect to that. So really overall what the takeaways is that the study indicates that risk attitude and safety specific experience affect hazard recognition. And we can say that from the people that came into and participated in our study. However, the effective risk attitude on hazard recognition did disappear with when you looked at safety-specific experience. So the gain that you got from the individual difference of being risk-averse or risk-tolerant actually went away with safety-specific training, which is really good for us, because what that really means is, despite individual differences in perception and sort of what your risk-taking ability is, you can train somebody to be as good as somebody else, is essentially what that means. Now, that's within our data set, but it's really important for us as a training industry to know and recognize that could help us improve. So given the results, some of the considerations that we think mining stakeholders should consider is that to increase, they should really try to increase safety-specific training, increase people's awareness, and expose new miners to low-hazard conditions. So knowing, what's going on, see what's going on, help them understand. We don't want people to put them at risk, but we do want to give them exposure. And then also they should consider, to improve hazard-specific training, actually incorporating daily toolbox talks and focus on site-specific hazards. So again, just more continual exposure, talk about safety, make sure it's prevalent. We started this session with a safety share. Are people thinking about it? Are they doing it as part of their job and incorporating it to mean that? As John mentioned, if you want to see Examiner in action, come visit our booth. We can talk about this. John and I just presented 2 pieces of this very large study that just concluded, but there was lots of different measures that we looked at with respect to hazard recognition. So this is just a piece of some of the work that we did. And then again, if you want to download Examiner, what is really great about this software and what came out of specifically this research is talking about safety-specific training and then site-specific training. In Examiner, you can take your own pictures and put your own actual hazards in there. So it's not just pictures that we took and we as NIOSH did, but it's the ability to incorporate your own training, incorporate focus that matters to mine workers at your site. Because we know, again, this training can be important and can overcome some of those individual biases. So thank you very much. I appreciate your time, and that's all I got.
Any question for Janika? Not? All right, I have a few questions actually.
Sure.
So correct me if I'm wrong, and this is what I think, like when you're exposed to a hazard, you get used to it, and then your tolerance to react to that hazard is lower. Do you think, as a person who has this expertise, do you think same thing applies to an examiner, that they see a hazard and they get used to it?
So absolutely, habituation has been proven. There's a lot of research on that as well. There's a counter effect of salience, though. So people have, some of the other work that we did as a part of this project was looking at risk assessment. So for all these hazards that we had people come in and identify, we also had them perform a risk assessment on and rate the risk severity as well as likelihood of it occurring. And you kind of have a back and forth, and it really depends on, I believe, people's experiences and how they're different. So the answer is yes, but it can work both ways. They can then think, oh, I see this all the time, but oh, I saw my friend just get injured. Now I'm very concerned about it. So it sort of depends on if they did have an experience with that or not.
And I have another question too. So CDC provides Examiner beta version for free.
Yes.
Do you think the Examiner is free forever?
Oh yeah, it'll be free forever.
All right. And
Yeah.
and have you?
It's almost not in beta. It's going through our. So the reason it's out in beta, is it official now? Did they sign the book? It's the very last stage. We need like 5 more signatures. Who knows? Something very close to that. But I mean, the issue is we put it out in beta to get it out there. It's going through a review of experts to make sure that the software is usable, it makes sense. It's only in beta just because we haven't officially have everybody reviewed. Yeah. So, well, yeah, because we'd originally put it out in beta because of that. But yes. So it will be free forever. It will be on there. Hopefully we can, our plan also is to provide different like picture packs or updates to it, depending on what makes sense, because you can always add more pictures or put different things in to support it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Aman, and thank you for attending my presentation on the effect of karst voids on pillar strength in an underground limestone mine. First of all, I would like to thank NIOSH and Itasca for providing the funding and support for conducting this study. And I would like to thank LOAST for allowing us to use one of their mines as a case study mine. And finally, I would like to thank my team from Virginia Tech, my faculty advisor, Dr. Ripepi, my teammates, Juan and Richard, for their help with this study. So first of all, I'm going to start with the introduction and background about this research, trying to tell you how karst affect the pillar strength in limestone mines. Next, I'm going to take you through the objective of the study and tell you how numerical modeling helps us bring this together. And finally, I'm going to discuss the results and future scope of this study. Starting with the introduction. So this study is part of a parent project of ground control research for improving safety performance in underground limestone mines. And this research revolves around 4 aspects of assessing the pillar strength and stability with karst void in presence, and also discrete fracture networks which represent the joint networks which are a typical feature of limestone deposits. And then I try to bring it all together using distinct element modeling in 3DEC. So what are karst voids? Karst voids are formed due to dissolution of limestone over a long period of time due to flow of weak carbonic acid or groundwater through them. And these voids could pose a serious safety hazard to the mine workers or the mine machinery when they come in contact with the immediate roof or sidewall or with the joint network systems. The case study mine in question oops. Some case the video is not allowing me to play, but the case study mine is, here you can see the topography, and here you can see the mine layout. So the case study mine in question is a multi-level room and pillar underground limestone mine, and the pillar in study is located at 6th level of this mine, which is approximately 300 meters below the surface. And this is the plan view of the pillar. So the typical layout, which is intended to be for the pillars in the mine, is about 80 feet by 80 feet by 100 feet in height after all the recovery is done. But for this pillar, which is shaded in red, the size is bigger than usual, which was left after karst were detected in the pillar, and the mine management decided to leave a bigger pillar to prevent any instability issues around that region. As I said before, the pillar height is intended to be about 100 feet, but this pillar was left at around 33 to 34 feet in height, which is about 10 meters in height, and this is how the pillar looks like. So what is the purpose of this study? The purpose of my study is to prevent this, the material collapse which you see in the picture on the right. And this happened in the case study mine due to interaction of the karst void with the immediate sidewall. Sometimes mine management uses ground control prevention techniques such as steel straps or synthetic mesh, which are temporary measures. And sometimes they use grouting as a permanent measure of countering these voids, which is more expensive. So as a part of this parent project itself, a study was done in which one of my colleagues conducted a ground penetrating radar survey along one side of the pillar. And this survey was done by sending high-frequency radio waves throughout the pillar to get these reflections. And we obtained these isosurface reflection around the Karst boundary. As you can see, these are not closed. The ideal situation would be in which we get a closed volume to estimate the complete Karst void. But water in these voids interferes with the reflection of these radio waves, and hence we could not get a complete closed void. But after that, an approximation was done to estimate the Karst volume. But we are going to address these issues in this numerical modeling study too. So the objective of my study revolves around 4 points. First of all is assessing the strength of the pillar with increase in stresses. Suppose the mine management is going deeper and deeper as they want to advance the mine, and they encountered these headings with the Karst void in them, and how do they want to design the pillar, how do they want to design the headings. We also need to consider the pillar strength considering different scenarios, which I'm going to talk about in future slides. And third point is estimating the actual stresses in the current conditions, which is important because we need to compare what are the current stress levels in our pillar and at how much stress level are they going to fail, or at what factor of safety do we want to keep them at. And there's a current study going on right now, which I'm not going to talk in detail about, but it is estimated that in that level, in the pillars, at that level, the current stresses are about 10 to 14 megapascals, and I'm going to leave this thing at that. And the fourth thing is future design or secondary recovery. Maybe the mine management wants to take out more ore material out of the remnants pillar in the future. So if that is possible or not. So the three scenarios are considered in this study to prevent any thoughts on why the Karst volume could not be determined completely. And for this, the first scenario would be considering the original pillar without any Karst to see what the original strength would be. The second scenario would be considering the pillar with the suggested Karst void, and these Karst voids are running throughout the volume, throughout the height of the pillar. And this is based on the GPR study that was done earlier. And the third would be to estimate a worst case scenario in which we consider there's no material left. There's no material left in between the Karst boundaries, and we consider the outer Karst boundaries as the final boundaries. So we are going to assess the strength of the pillar and simulate these three cases in 3DEC. So how numerical modeling helps us bring this all together? For this study, I'm using 3DEC, which uses discrete or distinct element method to better simulate the presence of joints and fractures, which are a typical feature in the limestone deposits. Amongst the many input parameters, it uses primarily these three parameters of physico-mechanical properties of the rock and the joints. The boundary conditions. The boundary conditions were fixed on the top and bottom of the pillar and were kept open on the sides. And thirdly is the stress conditions, which is imparted to the pillar using a constant velocity condition. For this study, elastic isotropic condition was assumed, which characterizes the pillar model as having reversible deformation upon unloading. I don't think this would be the ideal way to analyze the pillar, as it has been left for some time, so strain, softening, hardening material would be more efficient to use. But since we did not have that many elaborate properties, we had to use elastic isotropic model, which still would be closer to when analyzing the pillars in a fresh advanced heading. Another important aspect of this study is to do discontinuity mapping, or as in this case, doing manual virtual discontinuity mapping, which is taking the LiDAR scans around the pillar and sitting in a lab, taking out sampling windows and characterizing each and every joint sets that we encounter around the pillar, and getting important parameters such as joint size, orientation, and fracture density, and getting all these parameters, giving all these parameters to 3D to form discrete fracture networks, which is a 3D geometric representation of the discontinuities based on these parameters that we calculate using the discontinuity mapping. So in this study, we encountered 4 joint sets, and after giving these parameters to 3D, these joint sets are generated typically like this, as you see right now, one of them being a bedding plane joint set. And when combined together, this looks something like this, and we use this to cut our pillar model to form a blocky representation as close as possible to the real pillar, how that pillar looks like. So it looks something like this in case we are using scenario 2 to show this representation. Coming on to the results. So we are going to impart these constant stresses to the pillar and see how it behaves as the stress is increased. So as the stresses are increased, we can see rock fragmentation happening on the side walls. And as we increase the stress, we can see more spalling happening, more blocks falling off the sides. And the pillar ultimately fails when the stress level reaches around 62 megapascals. This is not exactly the condition which the mine management want the pillar to be deteriorated to. Suppose they would want to leave the pillar at a stress level of about 30 megapascals. Depends on, so we are giving them the freedom to decide how much stress level do they want the pillar to be at. Moving ahead with scenario 2. So this is the case with the suggested karst voids. And as we increase the stresses, we observe more fragmentation happening, more spalling happening from the side walls as compared to the previous case. And as we increase the stresses, we see that the pillar ultimately fails at about 52 megapascals, which is less than the previous case. And for the third case, hung up on me. Yeah. So for the third case, we are estimating that we are having a worst case scenario. And for this simulation, our pillar ultimately fails at about 34 megapascals. So we can see as we are increasing the karst void volume, our pillar strength has reduced significantly. Comparing all 3 cases, we can see that the pillar with no karst is the strongest, has the most strength. And as we are increasing the void volume, the strength is decreasing significantly. But as I mentioned before, the stress levels at around that level in the pillars is about 10 to 14 megapascals, considering 14 megapascals as a limit. We can see that there is still some room for improvement for the pillar design, or maybe in the future when advanced heading design is done or the pillar design is being done. So what inference do we make of this? This study could be used as a start towards optimizing ore extraction without compromising safety of the workers. As we can see, this gives mine management some freedom to decide what factor of safety do they want the pillar to be at. And that's how they can optimize pillar design. And maybe in the future, if they want to extract some more ore material from the remnants pillars, they could decide about that too. This study helps us understand that the karst voids have a lot of impact on the pillar strength. Increasing karst voids volume could impact the pillar strength, and that could reduce it significantly. And using the new Karst detection technologies, I came across one recently in which they drill a borehole into an advanced heading and with the GPR tool at the end, and it decides the Karst voids previously, before we could advance into that heading, and deciding the pillar designs and using numerical modeling to decide how we want to design that heading or the pillars around that region to maintain local as well as global stability. It could be useful in that. So, thank you very much. I guess I have 5 minutes for my questions.
Any question for?
Hi, it was very interesting. I just want to know what kind of GPR equipment you use for this study, like antenna strength.
It varied from about 250 megahertz to about 500 megahertz. I don't want to give you a number on by itself, but let me check with that, and I'll be back to you for that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. It was 250.
Yeah, that was 250 megahertz.
Okay. Thank you. For the next presentation.
Thank you.
Was the DFN in each pillar case exactly identical before you deleted the blocks inside the pillar?
As close as possible to each
But
other.
it wasn't the same random seed number?
It wouldn't
It can't be?
Yeah, it wouldn't be the
Okay.
same random seed number. But yeah, that would have to, for that, it's better to do multiple seed numbers and then compare.
I see.
But in this case, like each of the model takes about 3 days to run.
Yeah, I've never used 3-deck. It looks a lot more complicated than
Yes,
UDEC.
so like running, to do it, running at least 20 models would take like 2 months to
Oh my
run,
God.
and encountering problem in each one of that would pose a problem. But for that, for this study, it was as close as possible to each other.
Thank you. And then, sorry, 2 questions.
Yeah, sure.
Did you test more realistic loading conditions, like between the pillar and roof boundary, or that was fixed in every
That was fixed in every.
iteration? So
Yeah.
it would be interesting to see if it was a realistic loading condition.
Exactly.
I think
but-
that strength would drop
Exactly.
significantly.
For that, we would have to use like extensometers or stress cells in the pillars to see what the loading conditions are like. But because of cost, that would be impossible in some case, but we could use those in some area of the pillar to do that. That would be an interesting study as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. See, I told you students are even better. Okay. This is our last presentation, but not the least. We have we have Simone Gobb, right? We have Simone Gobb. Simone is a mining engineer at
Core mining.
Core Mining since January 2020. She graduated with a master's degree in December 2019 from University of Nevada, Reno, and her research was on evacuation methods in mining engineering, in mining using virtual reality. All right, it's all yours.
All right. Hello. Wait, does that work? Does it? Doesn't? No?
Maybe a little closer.
Now? It works. It does? Okay. I don't know. To me, it sounds really normal. Huh, maybe this way. So yeah, the title looks a little different than it does in the program book. I don't know, everybody who has written a thesis in their life, topics change from the initial one. It's still closely related to it though. So what we did, we looked at different evacuation methods in underground mining and run some simulations in virtual reality to see if one or the other is better. So just in very general, everybody here knows what underground mining is, but I just want to stress that underground mines can get really big. The biggest one has a network of drifts of 1,900 miles. So that's pretty long, and in the case of evacuation, you want to get to your safe place, whatever it is, the shaft or a refuge chamber, in the shortest time. So the past incidents in underground mining, I looked primarily at metal, non-metal underground mines, and as you can see, we had 61 fires in those underground mines between 1991 and 2000, and that's actually not too far away from what we always think is a little more unsafe coal underground mines with 76. And then I just wanted to show that caving, rockfall, and fire and explosions are things that still happen often enough, and yeah, those are events that can trigger an evacuation. And then I just have some recent mine evacuations down there, just to show that it is a recent topic. So what does the legislation look like when it comes to emergency training and evacuation drills? So theoretical training must be received every year. Then every employee has to be instructed in the escape and evacuation plans and procedures every 12 months, so once a year. And then in underground mines, this is metal, non-metal, not coal. So every 6 months, an evacuation drill should be conducted. I know some mines do even quarterly, but that's their own choice. But then more importantly, what I looked at is the signage, the route signage of exit routes. And so all it says in the legislation is they have to be marked with conspicuous and easily read direction signs that clearly indicate the ways of escape. And they look like, that's pretty much how they look. And for coal mines, they can also be used in metal, non-metal mines, are those lifelines. But these types of signage can be problematic in very low visibility conditions, which smoke, for example, can trigger as well. So I looked at a different method, and I looked through other research, primarily in occupational, or not occupational, but like when it comes to research of evacuation method in bigger buildings, public big buildings. They looked into smart evacuation, and smart evacuation is a method where every individual is tracked and located in real time, either using Wi-Fi, using radio frequency identificators, so using radio waves, or beacons. So beacons use Bluetooth, and they can interact with your phone. And from all these technologies, beacons are, as of now, the most accurate locationing, I keep pushing it, locationing and tracking technology, because they're relatively cheap, and so you can actually have a very dense network of those beacons to track people. Then you would need sensors to locate and track hazardous environmental conditions, like fire sensors, for example. And based on these information, you would compute a shortest and safest evacuation route for each individual. And then you have a few different ways to guide the individual to a safe spot. That would be either smart exit signs that can just change the direction depending on which route is the best one in this case, or applications for a phone that can use like real features of the actual situation and guide you out of dangers. And the human factor is a big part that plays into evacuation. It heavily depends on their decision making, depends on a lot of different factors. The social context, am I with a group? Am I by myself? What is the message content? Is the message actually right? What information do I receive? And then also the information sources and channel. If it's my boss telling me and I trust him, I will do whatever he tells me, or the other way around. So, and when we try to make the decision where to go in an evacuation, So first we would identify the risk and assess it, obtain all the information we need, and if we have all the information we need, we come up with a protective action, and if that action we think is helping us, we would implement that one. This is the ideal case. Since we're humans, the automatic system, so it's more like the unconscious part of your mind, triggers bias. It tells you like, oh, I'm fine. That's what people think all the time. Oh, nobody hurt, I won't be hurt. I'm not going to have a car accident. I'm in total control of the situation. I'll just finish up this task really quickly before I escape, or no one else is moving, so why would I? So, and this is something that we should prevent. So we, with the statement that we want to make underground mining safer and guide people out of the mine in the fastest, safest way without having that bias influencing them and making poor decisions, and accounting at the same time for the individual locations and routes and changing environmental conditions. We introduce a potential solution, which is applying smart evacuation to underground mining. And then this is just an idea of how it could be visualized either on a smartwatch or on smartphones. And our research hypotheses were that smart evacuation will reduce evacuation time, it will accelerate decision making, and it will promote confidence in decision making. So these are the reasons why I chose virtual reality as a test environment rather than actual underground mines. Underground mines, it's very, it would be very time-consuming, expensive. It is inherently dangerous, and it will hamper production. And then we don't even have all those beacons in an underground mine. We would have to implement it, which is all of the reasons above, just stronger. And so we chose virtual reality. And there are a dozen of papers on simulations in virtual reality and how they actually give a good indication of real life conditions and behaviors. It is safe, it is cheap, it's a rather simple setup. There is the possibility to constrain external influences, and most of the students that were conducting my experiments, they had fun doing it. So this is what the mine looked like that I had modeled. It is after Turquoise Ridge, which is in northern Nevada. It's an underground gold mine. And also the signage that I created was inspired in how it looks in their actual mine. So this is the conventional signage. And this is the smart wayfinder that I had programmed and that was floating in front of the participant all of the time and showing them the shortest route. So it was changing its direction. And that is that's my advisor, Javad, in our laboratory. Oh. I click and it doesn't want to play. Well, however, I think on this picture you can see the setup that we had. We had the VR goggles, and then this walking dish. This walking dish. And he had sensors on his feet, so as he walks on that walking dish, it's more like a sliding motion. He also moves forward in the game. So we wanted to make it a little more interactive and simulate more that actual condition of running during an evacuation. He didn't have to use any kind of controllers or something. And yeah, so this is kind of what it looked like underground. I had an interface that told people what to do. So yeah, find a refuge chamber to evacuate. I had the time count, and then you can kind of see the arrow. Now it's just like showing directly forward. This would be a video as well, but as I said, it doesn't want to play. So this is the kind of storyline that people went through during the experiment. They started the simulation, and it told them, yeah, find a refuge chamber or maybe a shaft. So there were two different situations. So they start this evacuation. Then they will run into an obstacle, which here would be, oh, the refuge chamber is actually full, so go and find a shaft. So they had to redirect. So they had to make a new decision on where to go. They had to find a new way. And then you would finish the evacuation if you actually get to that predetermined safe space. And this is a little more in-depth. I had an intro with the instructions on how to use it. I took a pre-survey just looking on, if people are, what they're studying and if they had been in underground mines. And then in order to eliminate or reduce a learning effect throughout all the simulations that I run later, I had an introductory level where they were introduced to both of the evacuation methods beforehand and to that environment in general, and they were able to stop whenever they felt comfortable with using all of the devices. And then I had 4 different simulations, and everybody went through all of those. So I had conventional, and I had conventional and smart, but I also made a difference between being in a brighter environment or being in an environment where they only had a headlamp and it was pretty much black all the time. And then after that, I conducted a post-survey, just like asking how they felt with using all these devices, if it hampered their performance, and also what they thought about it, what they preferred, which evacuation method. And then I evaluated the metrics. And the metrics that I was looking at was the total evacuation time, then the reaction time. So from that point, they ran into an obstacle. How long did it take them to turn around and find the actual right way? And then also the turning angle in that running device, because it has sensors all around it, and it tracks which position you are in. And I recorded that every 2 seconds. So this is kind of what one of the mine levels looks like from a bird's eye view. And that was kind of the hardest part, because every student went through all of those 4 simulations. So I had to have different routes, so they wouldn't memorize them simply in every simulation. But I had to ensure that they had the same length and the same complexity, the same amount of turning points, And then I also had to place the evacuation route signs in the conventional parts without introducing my bias. Of course, I would like the smart method to win over the conventional one. But so what I did was I consulted one of my colleagues who had worked at Turquoise Ridge, so the actual mine that I modeled, for 2 years before. He was the ventilation engineer, and he knew where all the evacuation signs were placed, so that was perfect. And then I had to create this smart wayfinder, and that's just like one of the tools that was provided in the game engine. I had to do some alterations so that this wayfinder always stays in your sight, and then I had to script that when you trigger certain events that the wayfinder will turn around and bring you to the next safe place. The total evacuation time also through rather simple scripting, saved everything in a text file. The text file kind of looked like this in the end, very simple. The reaction time, I installed triggers, so you kind of see those planes. They are invisible in the game, and every time, so if you walk through that first trigger, a timer will start, and if you walk out of it, the timer will end. So that kind of defines then how much time it took you to run into the obstacle and turn around to one of those sides. And also save that to a text file. And then the turning angle in the Omni, which is the walking dish, just over time. Then I also took screenshots every 5 seconds from a bird's eye view, and I was able to see where people were walking around, and I also made videos of every session. The bird's eye view, when I took those screenshots, it's this trail renderer, comes also with game engine. I altered it a little bit so you can see where it turns from green and then slowly to red. It's hardly visible, but this is the path that every, that one person took in that specific simulation. So I was able to see like, oh, where did people get stuck? Or which route did they actually take? Did they take the shortest one or not? So, and with all this information, I concluded here my average total time. So it took the longest in the conventional illuminated, so that was the first one they were running through, about like 350 seconds. And the shortest was in the smart dark level and also in the smart illuminated level with about 150 seconds, so reduced by a good amount of time. Also looked at the variability of the data, and in the first level it was pretty significant. The other ones were kind of comparable. So that was in the conventional dark. So, and then I applied a matched pair t-test to that data, and with a confidence level of 95%. So, and what this showed was that there were significant differences between all of these simulations in the average, in the average total time, in the total times. And so, just as a result, it came out that smart evacuation was faster in both scenarios, dark and illuminated, than the conventional one. I also did this for the reaction time. So also, the differences here are not as big. You can already see that the average times are kind of close to each other, except for that first one. Variability, pretty kind of comparable. If we look at the t-test, we see that only one of those comparisons was significant, and that was if we compared smart in dark conditions to the conventional in dark conditions. And we had a time reduction of about 10% in that case. Oh, and we had 13 students actually running those. I should mention that. And that was part of the qualitative data. So that was the turning angle in the Omni. And so qualitative, because I didn't apply any statistics to it, it was more a visual examination. So here you see the accumulated times and turning angles of every simulation in that specific level, conventional illuminated. And you can kind of see that there are very dense lines. So every line that goes like up and down the whole way is like 180-degree turning angle. So this shows how much people turned over time. And just judging from the density in the conventional method, people turned around a lot. And I could also see that in the videos that I recorded. In the smart simulation, it looks like the turning angles, the turning recordings are less dense, and you can kind of see the same pattern. It's the same pattern in most of these. This one is just a little stretched. So this kind of gives us an indication that people were a little less confused using the smart one and just went that same path every time. And then I had some just fill-in sections in the post-survey. People wrote stuff like, okay, I prefer smart evacuation because it will guide me to where I need to go without worrying. It's easier to follow, less thinking, and our thinking process doesn't work as well in stress. Or there's just heavy bias, which we want to reduce. Then they suggested that smart evacuation can enhance mine safety because people will consume lower amounts of energy just running to a wrong place and then turning around again. It will help them save time and get to safety faster, and it will calm you down. And 83% of the participants preferred smart over conventional method. 100% thought it would contribute to mine safety. Yes, and so my conclusions for this were, if my hypothesis that I put up first reduces evacuation time, yes. That is based on a statistical evaluation. Did it accelerate decision making? Kind of tough because most of the differences were not significant. And did it promote confidence in decision making? Yes, which is indicated by the qualitative data that I collected. And overall, I had a very positive result for the smart evacuation method. And in the most extreme case, the evacuation time was reduced by up to 40% in average. And that concludes my presentation. Questions?
I actually, yeah, we have like about a minute for questions.
Oh, it's already over.
Oh, okay, so then we don't have time for questions,
have
but I'll make sure
lunchtime.
to have Simone here to answer any questions. This was our last presentation. I'm going to conclude the session. Thank you very much to all the presenters. Please give them a round of applause before leaving. All right, I hope you enjoyed the rest of SME and have a safe trip back home. And that's it. Have a good afternoon.